Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we're going to be reviewing Jaws for a big anniversary year, and we couldn't do this episode without two of our film pod friends, Dana and Tom. Do y'all want to introduce yourselves?
Go ahead. Oh, of course.
You know, they share the same genetics.
Yeah. So I am Thomas Duncan. I am from the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the creator and, let's say, co-host of that particular program. We use a particular self-created greatness Stanley rubric to measure how films stack up in 6 different categories against each other, because how do you necessarily measure the greatness of Jaws versus Citizen Kane?
Or for that matter, Waterboy.
Yeah, okay.
If
it were not for a very recent example from an episode, I don't know if you would have pulled that particular film out, but there's several goofy or silly ones that we've certainly done over the course of time that you would not think that they rank as highly as they do, and yet somehow it comes out weird every time.
I'm Dana Duncan. I'm the co-host of Gmote. That's about all I can say. I don't have much else. We started doing this during the pandemic, and
technically we started 2 weeks before the pandemic hit the United States.
Oh, no way. That's crazy timing. And all of a sudden you had a lot of time to build a podcast, you know?
Very, very much so. So this is, I think, our current 6th season, and we release episodes every Wednesday, so most people should be able to have that in their feed. You can find us on any of the major platforms, and we also do a video version on YouTube. So Spotify, Apple, YouTube, any of those, you can certainly find us, or any of our socials at Gmote Podcast, GMOAT.
Love it. Love it. We've potted with these folks in the past, and they just go really in depth and thorough in their study and analysis of film. It's really amazing, and just huge swaths of film knowledge that they both have that I think adds so much dimension to their discussions about film. So just plug for their show in general. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you.
And you guys will be back again with us
folks
soon.
for Jaws, you know? Yeah. All right, so we're talking about Jaws today. It's a big anniversary, as we mentioned, the 50th anniversary for this film. So big celebration, big legacy with this film. Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Jaws before we dive in?
Sure. When a massive killer shark unleashes chaos on a beach community off Long Island, it's up to a local sheriff, a marine biologist, and an old seafarer to hunt the beast down.
All right. And in Movies and Us tradition, we often start off with our own written one-sentence summaries for the film. Dana or Tom, do you want to share yours first?
So it's the intersection between public safety and public commerce.
Nice.
Yeah.
I decided to come at this in a different direction. I'm taking the side of the fish. Fish while vacationing in New England, brutally murdered by rogue cop and 2 government agents.
Oh, I love
that's so good.
Nicely
well
done.
Well done. You and Sarah can talk about your deep empathy for beastly creatures that get, taken out by the humans. Sarah, do you want to share your love for Godzilla?
I do have a love for Godzilla, and I also felt really bad for Bruce the shark, but that did not make it into my one-sentence summary. I took a similar approach to Tom, actually. My local summary is, local politics are important.
Nice.
By the way, thank you for using the shark's actual name. Not everybody knows it's named Bruce.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So we can easily refer to the shark as Bruce now. It's only respect for the fish, use its actual name. All right, well, I took I think similar vein as both Sarah, and Thomas. So, Dana, thank you for bringing the pizzazz to our one sentence summaries. My one sentence summary is capitalism, bureaucracy, and the hubris of man can devour you.
Solid and true.
All right. Well, let's maybe share. I don't even know our thoughts, our relationship with this film, maybe some of the things that were notable in our most recent rewatch about Jaws at a high level. There's so much to talk about with this film, so feel free to take this in the direction that you feel most passionate about. But let's share kind of our thoughts about this film in general, and then we won't spoil it yet. It's been 50 years. It's also one of the most iconic films and greatest films of all time. Plug for their podcast. So we're gonna keep this section brief, and then we're going to give a spoiler and dive fully into some of the aspects and plot points and all that goodness of this film. So, yeah, what's your relation to this film, and how has it changed, evolved, and maybe on this most recent rewatch, things that stood out to you about Jaws?
So this is a film, and if you've listened to our show for any length of time, you know that I'm not a particular fan of horror or anything that's kind of gory. It really bothered me as a kid. I've become much less sensitive to it in my, let's say, old age, being 34, almost 35 now. But as I've gotten older and watched more violent things, it doesn't bother me nearly as much. But this is a film that, because of its subject material and obviously its legacy, that I just never bothered to watch. But it was one of those that's like a glaring omission when you start really getting into film. If you haven't seen this, it's like certain seminal movies. If you just haven't seen it, you are not a film fan, kind of thing. Or at least that's the film shame I would have gotten if I had really gone too far. Now, I think this was our 35th or 38th film when we first discussed it in season 1. We did this very early on. And so I strategically, as I often do in seasons, put films on the list that I feel like I need to see, but I need a reason to watch them. So we did this very early on in our show. And I think it was only the second movie in season 2 that we did a revisit episode for. We had a great guest on at the time, had a great lively debate over whether or not this is a horror film, which I think it definitely at least borrows a conversation, because while I'm not sure I necessarily do, he was very convincing at the time. This is also a film that, for the longest period of the Gmote show, has been at the number 1 spot the longest. It is not currently, it is number 3. It may get back to number 1 here very shortly, because, like you guys, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary ourselves, but over the July 4th week, we're revisiting it with a couple of new guests. Not new to the show, but new people to the movie, and covering it on our show for its 50th anniversary coming up. And I have a feeling, because one of them at least is a mega super fan of this movie. It's his favorite movie of all time. He has very distinct memories of watching it in the theater when he was like 5 or 6 years old, that this movie could yet leap again back to number 1. But it's been a movie that's closely connected with the history of our show, and it's been a joy to revisit yet again, because I don't think it's nearly as horrific or scary, even though it has like certain jump scare moments, as I think the legacy was built up in my head to be for the first 30 some years of my life.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's a much different experience. I was 11 that summer, summer 75. And my sister and my mother worked. So my sister and I was younger, fought a lot. And so we needed a referee. So my parents had a high school girl who babysat us all summer. She started reading Jaws, the book by Peter Benchley. So I asked her what it was about. And the next thing I know, she's reading it to me. So every day I got the book read to me.
Wow.
And then she went and saw the film and came back and reported. So it'd been several years before I actually was able to see it, because this is not something my parents would have necessarily taken me to. So I think I first saw it released on in its entirety on HBO. So probably looking at about 4 or 5 years after its a full release. But I remember the craze that was going on and how big this was. I mean, I mean, at one point in time, they actually created a song where it's these cuts from different songs. They would be pretending to interview Mr. Jaws, and then, it would be cuts of songs that would respond. So there was this whole thing, Mr. Jaws, and are you intending to attack again? And then they're playing Captain and Tim Neal. I will, stuff like that. So this was a huge deal. And there were people that were scared to even go in lakes, going, there are no sharks in lakes, people. But they were still afraid to swim because they were afraid somehow something was going to get them if they were in the water. And so, and then everybody running around going, don, don, da, don, da, don. And then, of course, Saturday Night Live plays it up by coming up with the concept of land shark, where the guy's knocking on the door and just, you know, who's there? Land shark. And then it would open the door and it would attack you. It was incredibly stupid, but it was so stupid it was funny. So living through this, I don't think people understand the cultural phenomenon that took place with this movie. It was way off the charts.
Mhm. That's super fascinating that you actually experienced the book before getting to see the film. I'd forgotten that was a detail until seeing some of the opening credits this time around. And this film is so cinematic that to imagine that as a book was just a fascinating thought exercise. So I'm curious if there are big deltas that if you remember, or maybe this film just has
Do you mean
been
Mr.
so
Hooper
prominent in
hooking
your
up
mind.
with who's the sheriff's wife? I can't think of her name, character name. But yeah, Mr. Hooper
Yeah.
has an affair with the sheriff's wife or the chief's wife.
Oh.
And there were certain things that were eliminated for script convenience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. Nice. So you got to see the full cultural phenomenon in the moment and throughout all of these years too. So fascinating to see that
Yep.
full legacy. Yeah. Sarah, what about you? What's your relationship to Jaws? Anything that stood out to you, especially in this most recent rewatch, as you've thought about this film over the years?
Yeah, I've seen this a handful of times. It's probably been 9-ish years since I watched it the last time. So it's been a little while. I think I was surprised this time around at just how kind of cheery this movie is. I think I had remembered a lot of the violent horror parts, like you were talking about, Thomas, and so then to be watching it again and being like, wow, this is actually there's a lot of cheery moments. There's a lot of playful banter happening. This is a lot happier movie than I think I had remembered, which is just also interesting to think about. You have this film that's kind of objectively horrifying of this shark just coming and eating people, and then you have this really cheery score happening in the background. It's fine, guys. So I found that really, really interesting this time around, and then just doing a little bit of research about some of that history and some of that staying power that Jaws has. Because even watching it this time, I'm able to think of other movies or TV episodes that riff off of Jaws. It's everywhere. And the staying power of this movie and that realization that pretty much every other shark movie since then has been trying to do Jaws. And I don't think living up to it. So the fact that this is as good as it is and remains that good today while still being this influential is very impressive. I'm not surprised that it's currently number 3 on the Gmote list, because it's truly impressive what Jaws has achieved.
I don't think we have Shark Week on
Discovery,
cable
yeah.
Yeah, without this movie,
Mm-hmm.
let alone Sharknado, which I still don't understand.
Okay.
We
Have
need
you
a
watched any of
watch
them, Dad?
along.
Yes, I watched 5 minutes of one and wanted to blow my brains out. Flying sharks. Woo!
I would love a watch along episode with Dana just stream of consciousness watching this film. I think the world needs some of that, you know.
No
I don't
one
know if
wants to
we've
Just do your
see my
perfected.
public
stream of
service.
consciousness. No one wants to see it.
I don't know if we've perfected the watch along podcast per se yet, but we certainly have done at least one decent live tweet session while watching a recent
Nice.
movie. So
That's a great idea. Yeah.
that might be feasible.
Consider it. Sharknado, please be one of the entries, candidates,
Juror
options.
number 6?
Juror number 2.
Okay. Couldn't remember the number. Yes.
Oh, that's an interesting one to do. Yeah. Do a live session for. Okay, I'll share my thoughts quickly, and then we'll give spoiler alert for this film and dive fully in. So, it's been probably like 8 or 9, even more. You know, anything beyond like 7 years, I'm just like I don't remember the time before that instance. So it's been a long time since I've seen this film, and I remember obviously the visceral like adrenaline inducing part of this film, and obviously it's in a cinematic classic. The theme obviously iconic. So that's kind of what stayed with me for most of the years is like this is a historical film that it's a huge legacy. That theme is iconic, and there's obviously this like visceral experience as an audience viewer watching this. What I didn't remember as much and was struck by this time around is that all of that is there, but also there's the text is much richer than I remembered it being. I thought it was more focused on the spectacle of a shark attacking this town and whatnot. But I found that there's a lot of scenes, especially in the first half, I would argue that maybe the first 2/3, that are focused on the people and human dynamics as they figure out how to organize themselves and come up with a plan to combat the shark, combat Bruce. So that was really fascinating to me, is that there's a lot of perspective around local city governments, around greed, about economic capitalism that's really baked into this film as well. And then I was also really impressed by how much this is such a process movie in the second half of the film. I remember the shots of underwater and kind of the big iconic adrenaline moments, but those are actually far less than I remembered. And there's a lot more them discussing what they need to do in every step along the way and the plan that they hatch that then goes wrong, and then they have to hatch a new plan. So I think that makes this film really fun too, is that we're constantly hearing the characters discussing what their plan is, seeing how it unfolds, seeing it fail, them being pressed and having to try again. So I think that makes this film so great. And then one of the other things that I just had more capacity perhaps to think about this time around was studying how the shot construction of those adrenaline inducing moments in the scene really add to the drama of it all. There's actually not a lot of like things you see. It's a lot of very strategically constructed juxtaposed shots together that I think just they tell a full story and create so much adrenaline from the shot construction and the cinematography. So that really stood out to me this time around. Obviously, the theme in the score is like really iconic the first time, but the way that the shots are put together, I think is pretty genius in this film. So I feel like everyone knows Jaws is amazing, and Spielberg did an incredible job with this. But I think this time around, I'm like, I can really more deeply appreciate some of the filmmaking parts of this as well. So, all right. Well, spoiler alert. It's been 50 years since Jaws came out, and it's an incredible film. So go see it, and we're about to dive fully in. So I'm
Pun
curious.
intended.
Actually, no, but what a happy accident. So I'm curious for everyone in watching this more recently, what were the things that maybe really stood out to you and you found yourself mulling on a little bit more Because I think, especially with films that are so beloved, so ingrained, ones that we know so well, it's often fascinating to see what new things are being unearthed as we experience the film with each successive watch. Is there anything
I
this
was
summer?
struck by the parallels of um, Quint with uh, Moby Dick. I
Mm.
mean, the boat's named the Orca. Um, and you think about it, it's his revenge for his experience on the Indianapolis, and he's taking it personal. And anybody who tries to interfere with his ability to destroy this thing that he perceives as a menace that's kind of affected him and his life, he will stop. You know, destroying the transmitter, fighting everybody over how he's going to handle killing the shark, etc. So
I would say there's a couple of different things that stand out to me. The first is that, as I mentioned kind of in my opening, that this is very closely tied to the history of our show. So there's a lot of fond memories, even flashing back to our season one, which in no way is like perfect, or when we really perfected the voice or structure of the show yet. But I remember early on we did, because 2020 was an unusual year to begin with, but when we did our All the President's Men episode on election night that year, I think my dad made the point in that episode that certain movies fit the time in which they are made, and that they will become more classic as circumstances around it kind of dictate. And I think I remember, even in our original Jaws episode, how much it struck me that, due to kind of a simple accident, that a lot of this movie, and you mentioned the term happy accident, this movie is just so many different happy accidents all occurring simultaneously, such as Steven Spielberg is like the third or fourth choice director. But if you go back to his work on Duel, which is his technically first film, but it was not cinematic, it was a TV film, there are a lot of factors that you can see in Jaws from that movie, such as you never see the driver of the truck that's constantly following him. So it's kind of this faceless thing. In the same way, you never really see the shark that much. There's one time where they show the animatronics, and when we watched it last night as a refresher for this episode, it looks so bad because you can see the fish flailing, and it looks so bad in the animatronics. So he made the decision early on that, because Bruce the shark, which is named after his lawyer, is so bad outside of the water and it looks terrible, we're not going to show the shark that often. We're just going to show people's results or interactions with the shark after it's come in contact with them. And that makes the shark that much more ominous and terrifying, much in the same way he kind of borrowed that from Psycho, where we didn't know what the mother was up until the end, but we didn't know we had come in contact. So it's this kind of nameless, faceless figure that's always there as a presence, adding fear and thrills throughout the course of the movie. And how much, in the time that we recorded this in 2020, we related that to COVID, because that was the time and where we were going. We had this thing, we had no idea what it was, how it was spread. We kept thinking for a long time during that it was like surface contact. So you're wiping down every piece of grocery you have and every bag, every surface constantly. You're constantly having hand sanitizer and soap all over the place to the point where your hands are raw, and relating that to this shark, where it's the public safety. Should we close the beaches? Should we close all of the stores and places that everybody goes to and congregates because that's what's best for public safety? Or should we have some level of sociality still remaining that we can kind of grapple with? So I'm very much struck in a post-COVID universe that that's really the first time that I watched this movie, and I related a lot to kind of our own struggles with the difference between public safety and the public's good overall health, because there's kind of this weird dynamic. You have to have the commerce because that's also supporting of a general public good, but you have to balance that with safety. And who wins in that battle? Because one person's potential death, does that really affect everybody's livelihood in the town? So that's kind of there. The other one is and I've focused a lot on it when I've talked about this, and I think I did in the little blurb that we sent to you guys for the social episode that you guys did ahead of time. The dolly zoom, the history of the dolly zoom. It's really brought back by this film. It was created for the most part, Vertigo in 1958, but you don't really see it through the history of cinema up until this movie. And there are two very famous shots. One is when it zooms in on Chief Brody seeing somebody being attacked out in the water, and that's the Kintner boy. And the other one is that I hadn't noticed it until this time through, but when the 4th of July scene is winding down, you see the dolly zoom go out underneath the wooden bridge and back out towards the sea. And both are used as a method of focusing you in on something, but creating a certain level of doom and apprehension that's there. And I think you've seen an explosion in that kind of film work since. Like you can see a lot more examples after this movie came out because of that inclusion in those two spots.
Yeah, the happy accidents thing is fascinating, especially the choice to not show it as much as perhaps they had originally planned. And I think that so many of those shots in those sequences where we actually have a POV shot of Bruce are essential as well. It adds a feeling of uh, intention. It adds a personification to this faceless creature that we get so many shots of from below, the silhouettes of the swimmers with the sun streaming through from almost the angle and the lens that Bruce would be. And I think that adds so much as well to that feeling of we can't see it, but like its presence, we almost inhabit and we feel and it's personified. There's also a lot where the characters discuss and talk about the shark as if it has intention, as if it has intelligence. You know, there's so much conversation with Quinn being like, oh, he's so smart, he's out there, and blah, blah, blah. And so they talk about it like it has such clear, almost planful tactics and strategizing. And I think that also adds to the feeling of drama and fear and whatnot, because it's not a monstrous force of nature, which it is, but it also has intention and intelligence, which adds to the feeling of the foe is greater than we could even imagine it. It's not accidental. It's not random. It actually is planful, and that's really fun too. I think in seeing the humans face off against a creature like that.
The other piece that I loved about that is that the second half of the film is just our three protagonists versus Bruce. And you don't see any other people, you don't see land. Like, you truly feel isolated and alone with these guys. And I think the film does a good job of showing their interpersonal clashes, and then they also have those moments where they're able to bond and respect one another, and you see how they work together. And I think that that use of isolation is so smart in helping us like experience what they're experiencing, but also increase that tension because it's just them. They know help is coming. And I think that that makes everything all the more tense and just horrifying to watch.
Yeah, there are five maybe tones of Spielberg, and anytime he crosses over that two of them are meeting, it tends to be his biggest films or the ones that we remember the most. In this particular episode, you can see kind of the thriller horror aspect of what he's doing that he also reinvents when you're getting to like Jurassic Park. He very much uses that again. He's very good at historical movies with a lot of emotion and tenderness and bringing you into the vulnerability of those. He's great at adventure films. In this one, the second half is really more of an adventure film, and you get that in E.T., you get that in Raiders of the Lost Ark or any of the Indiana Jones films. You get that to a degree in Jurassic Park as well. But he's really great at sci-fi and fantasy. And you get a lot of those different combinations within this movie because, as I've said before, it's kind of a tale of two movies. The first half you spend with all of the people on the island, and in that way as like the slasher horror killer, but it's only in this very confined, limited space. And the second part, you can see the tonal shift in the score, particularly where they use a lot more woodwinds and particularly flutes to highlight that this is kind of a soaring sea adventure, that they're after this shark. And that's where it kind of, to me, takes on the personification of Dad mentioning Moby Dick before, but they're hunting their great white shark.
The more I watch it, the more I realize, even though Spielberg credits John Ford as being kind of like his idol, how much he really takes from Hitchcock. I mean, the way that the film is cut, you swear you see violence and blood when you don't, which is reminiscent of the shower scene from Psycho, which, if you ask people who watch it for the first time if there was actually a stabbing, and they will swear up and down that there is a stabbing being done, and no time do you ever see the knife penetrate anything. And you know, uh, not to mention the fact that, again, he understands more, I think, than Hitchcock did. That, Hitchcock, I think, and I'm probably paraphrasing a story, the difference between violence and um, bring a blank
You're talking
and
about
tension
suspense.
and suspense is, if I blow up a bomb under a table, that's violence. If I have a bomb under a table and I'm letting you see that the bomb is going to go off in 3 minutes, that's suspense. Because now you're wondering, is this bomb actually going to go off? What's going to happen? Are they going to figure it out, etc.? And that's the difference. Is he let the suspense build so often. For example, the scene where Hooper's in the cage, the shark goes by, and then all of a sudden you're wondering what, it's just kind of like quiet for about 10-15 seconds. Then the shark attacks from behind. You have no idea how it got there, but all of a sudden, bam. And I think watching this for the first time, everybody's jumping, and everybody, their hearts are racing, uh, because they're anticipating the shark is going to get it.
To help
And
you to help
yeah,
you out, Dad, suspense is knowing there's a bomb, while tension is the feeling of knowing it will explode soon.
okay. So it's been a while since I read the piece. So
It's from Hitchcock's interviews with Truffaut.
yep, okay. Yeah, I do remember watching that now. Now that you're mentioning it, I couldn't remember if it was out of that or if it was out of the or of the biography I read of Hitchcock a few years ago. But anyway, so that's kind of, I see so much borrowed from that in this film, um, which that's probably one of the reasons why I love this film so much, is because I'm such a huge Hitchcock fan.
But
Not
then
to mention the
again,
fact that I think some of what Spielberg does is I think he gets criticized for being so commercial at times, instead of an artist, and that's Hitchcock. I mean, the reason why Hollywood kind of shunned him so much is he was making so much other money off of television shows, that they kind of dissed him because, how dare you use your abilities to make money, on television? Ooh.
then again, don't dismiss John Ford's effect on this movie. The horizon is very rarely in the middle.
That is true.
To build on your point around tension, suspense, violence, there's a sequence that happens, I think, in the first third of the film. It's in the first half where it's a scene with they're all at the beach, and we're just beginning to be introduced to the threat and the fear around the shark. And it's so clever the way that it's constructed in creating two options for what something might be. So it's when Brody's watching at the beach, and there's two moments where he thinks he sees a shark, but we get our expectations subverted. The first time, it's the old man's swimmer's cap. Second time, he sees a girl screaming. It's actually she's just getting picked up by one of her friends on his shoulders. So there's these two moments where we feel the tension and then it's diffused. We feel the tension and then it's diffused. Then we see that shot of the giant group of young Boy Scouts go into the water. And at this point, to use that metaphor of like, is there a bomb under the table? We don't know if it's a bomb or if it's like a ball under the table at the point anymore, like, because he's played with our expectations that we can see that it could be both paths. We think it may be, but we don't know. Is he going to play with our expectations once again? And that's when the danger strikes, and we see that Alex Kiltner gets taken out by the shark, and there's all that red blood in the sea and whatnot. But I thought that buildup of giving us two almost, and then giving us that actual shark attack, which is some really genius ways that I think the screenwriting is playing with our expectations. There's these moments of tension that are built up, but then they're released. And so when it's building up again, we're kind of like, well, I don't know, it could go either way. And that is fun because the threat may or may not even be there. And so that moment of surprise again adds so much impact and kind of the ripple effect from that moment. So the lead up to the Alex attack, I think, was really, really great, really clever.
And such an effective use too of all of the people that are there too, because it's not just one person who is affected by this attack. It's not just one person that dies in this attack, but you see that this is an entire community that is now having to grapple with the effects of this shark and the decisions by the leadership to, change the medical examiner report, keep the beaches open, all of that. Like, you really see and feel the effects of that decision, and you understand, that tension between commerce and public safety, but now you're actually like seeing people grapple with it. So I think that buildup is really tense and so well done, but I think also it's such an effective use of the people to really drive the point home of like, wait, this is a big deal and this is affecting everybody.
Yeah, that was one of the weird things that I guess finally came home for me last night watching this again, is how quaint all of the problems in the town are. It does a really great job of emphasizing, well, there's this car that's parked in a red zone in front of my house, or there's this car that's parked in front of my store, and you need to deal with this. While he's obviously trying to grapple with essentially this huge issue of public safety, all they're worried about is do our stores stay open, and are there any nuisances that are around, such as the Boy Scouts rattling on the picket fences or destroying property. And you're like, oh yeah, this is really a small town where they have the smallest of issues and they're all worried about the smallest of things.
Well, and then Brody talking about New York City and the crime and everything, and now you're going. I'm sure at this point in time he may be would be happy to be back in New York City.
Well, and that's an aspect that I think is like so written into the dynamics in the first half, is how much Brody feels like an outsider. There's so many comments from him where he's very clearly saying that I don't like the water, I don't know why I'm here, blah blah blah. But you also hear other characters in the community ask each other, did you grow up on the island? No, you didn't. Yes, you did. You're part of us. And so this kind of insular community and the way that it's hard to feel like you belong, I think makes us maybe inherently root for Brody a little bit too at the beginning, because everyone's felt like an outsider at some point. And he's fighting not just bureaucracy and local city government and capitalism. He's also fighting just like human dynamics and like insular communities, and feeling like his voice is heard, that he's valued, that he can make change here. That's also what he's up against too. I think makes us kind of root for him more. We don't know that much about him, and I think it takes some time for us to like really get on board with him. But I think that dynamic alone is a very clear like character empathizing moment for us with Brody.
Well, and the fact that his whole journey ends up with him on a boat taking out Bruce, when he hates the water and all of that. So I love how that opening bit and his dislike of the water, refusing to get in the water, not trusting what's in the water, is eventually set up for him having to go out, face his fears, and do this thing to save his community. So I think that's a really important aspect to this, and it weaves it in a way that is believable and makes sense, and also sets up that character choice as a I don't know, sign of overcoming something.
I guess if I were to also highlight something, Spielberg does a really great job of dropping foreshadowing exposition without making you feel like it's a file scene. When the tanks come unmoored because Brody unties the wrong knot, and careful, these will explode. Well, obviously that's foreshadowing to the ending, but you also have when his kids are playing in the boat just off of the dock. That's foreshadowing eventually when they're going to end up in the pond and they're on their own boat and they're going to be in danger. There are so many little things like that that the more often you watch it, you see where the creative makeup is there. But the first time through, you're like, oh, this is just explanation for explanation's sake.
Well, one of the things I noted too is the scene where Hooper's going to go down and he's putting on his gear. He grabs the tank and puts it on, and as he walks out, the shot lingers on the remaining tank sitting on the table.
Yeah, it's so good. I noticed that too. It's like, hey, there's two of those. We got to pay attention to this one. So I love all of those little subtle ways that Spielberg is like, hey, pay attention to this. This is going to come up later.
One of the other things that I think this film does a good job of is managing the emotional beats throughout the film, uh, both leaning into the moments that is necessary at the right time of the emotion of it all, but then also not leaning too much into the sentimentality, which I think sometimes Spielberg can. He's a sentimentalist, so I think that can be easy for him sometimes. So there's two moments that I think really stand out to me, and him managing that well. The first is the Alex killing her mom scene with Brody, where she has a tearful confrontation with him and says, "You knew this whole time." I thought that scene is so important, and we spend quite a long time in that scene, screen time wise. It you see a shift in the way that Brody from that point onwards feels a deep moral conviction that maybe he was wrestling with before, but now has been there's a catharsis, there's a full commitment to I got to do this. Like this is no longer just me having to figure out how to stay within the system, but also have these moral convictions. That moment is so pivotal, and it feels like the movie shifts. Like it's all like we got some deaths at the beginning, but no, this young boy has died, and we see his mom, and she's emotional, and like that. There's an emotional beat there that I thought landed so well and lasts far longer than I expected to. So I thought that was a really great like middle moment in the film. And then I was surprised by, because I think I had remembered or thought that we would get the whole they land back on shore, the town welcomes them back. And I love that the film cuts with them just swimming back. And that's where the film ends. I thought that was really smart, and perhaps in the hands of another filmmaker, or, like without the reins and maybe leaning into so much of the sentimentality, we would have gotten the big reunion with him running into the arms of his wife and his kids and the town celebrating. And I thought the choice to not have any of that actually makes the impact of the ending really strong. And we're back on shore. We get the ending credits showing. There's this wide shot of being back, on land, but we don't get to see that feel goody reunion bits. And I thought that was really smart because it doesn't choose to lean into a whole another extra emotional beat that I think would have felt really cheesy for a film that is so adrenaline inducing. It would have felt like too much whiplash for us to go back to shore and do all that feel goody stuff. When also we've just lost Quinn, having to deal with the ripple effects of that too. I think they had a smart choice to just roll the ending credits, let all of the mixed emotions sift within us.
For a long time, I was wondering why exactly the most violent aspect of the film is Quint's death. But then when you listen to the monologue of the Indianapolis and how he finds his friend bobbing
Mm.
up and down. He's been bit in half. That ended up having to be, you had to see how the Quint's demise was him being bitten in half.
Well, but that's also a note of 70s filmmaking, particularly in films that were entertaining of the time comparative to where we're at now. I think too many filmmakers have become somewhat self-involved that they have to add in 50 other things into this movie that would make it a half an hour longer, and the audience just does not have the patience, especially in an era with so much ADHD, to be able to sit there for that long. That's why this movie has lasted. It's the exact right length.
Absolutely. And like nothing is out of place, nothing feels overindulgent, you know. And there are times when this film kind of pauses and settles into a scene. And one of my favorite examples, you just referenced it, Dana, is that monologue where Quint is talking about the Indianapolis. Like it is so gripping. And I mean, we're just sitting there with him for a while, but you are riveted the entire time. And so I love that moment. It really gives us a chance to breathe and learn more about this character who's kind of mysterious, and you learn that there's a lot of depth to him and you understand his trauma better and like why he is this crazy guy who's out here hunting sharks. But it's also just such a tense and riveting scene, but it's all accomplished through the dialogue and the story that he's telling. I loved that moment, but it doesn't last too long and they don't cut it off too early. Like that scene is just the right length for what we needed to get out of it. And then we just keep moving on because hello, Bruce is back.
And Robert Shaw wasn't drunk when he did it for once.
That is helpful. Yes.
Very useful. Dana, I love that you're really picking up on the Quint storyline, or it seems like that stood out to you quite significantly this recent watch. There is something poetic about his story, and when that monologue happens in the arc of the film, it actually like arguably happens late for understanding who that character is, and yet it's poetic because it's like days before he passes. And so there's something that's like really well timed about that scene as well, in that monologue moment, that we don't get it early on where we get to learn about the character and we're introduced to the character and all these things. It actually happens much later, and it happens right before he meets his demise. But there's almost like something leaving his body. You kind of get the feeling that he hasn't actually talked about this a lot too, but there's something that he maybe senses and whatnot around this is the moment and he's in his final hours and this is when he wants to share that. And there's something poetic about the timing of that all, you know?
Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to express this, but maybe it's just as I'm getting older. I think I'm 61, and if I remember right, Robert Shaw was about 57, I think 58 when he did this film. And you just reach a point in your life when you're looking back more over what you've lived than what you have left to live, that you have kind of this different perspective. And, I mean, the fact that, why was he running the ship at full speed, knowing that the engine was going to blow? Because he could not bring himself to the fact of, if I just leave this thing to I can beach it and it'll die by itself. So therefore, no, I still have to wrestle with my own self, my own demons to kill the fish. So I'm going to bring it in as close as I can so that I have better ability to get it without actually causing something other than, myself doing it. So
That's fascinating. The Quinn storyline is one that this watch like I didn't think as much about, but as you're talking about it more, there's a lot of like choices that he makes that are so uh, pivotal to this success or some of those predicaments they find themselves in. But you see how it's it's coming out of a place of like greater like turmoil almost over time. Like he's kind of this cool guy. He's got this pizzazz to him and this sense of mystery to him at the beginning, but he's generally grounded. But as their mission lasts longer and longer, you do feel emotionally, like you're talking about, Dana, that increasing obsession and this fixation on the goal and it being done the way that he wants it to be versus getting the job done. There's something more that's driving him that you get the sense of. Hooper and Brody are just kind of like, Hooper's there just because he's like, studying the sharks and thinks it's cool and wants to see this thing. Brody just wants to get home safe in one piece, to his family. But you do feel like there's something more beyond this being just the shark for Quinn that I think is so palpable. And I didn't really think about it that much until you're sharing about it now. That's really good.
Did this movie popularize the term nails on a chalkboard?
That's what I was wondering too.
Like,
Also,
what an
what a
introduction to a
great,
character.
right? Like, number one, who does that? Like, oh, hey, there's this chalkboard. Let me get everybody's attention by dragging my nails on it. But yeah, you learn so much about Quint in that one moment, that one choice.
I had a teacher who would do that whenever the class was misbehaving. And I don't know if it was about the same time as this or before, but that was what he would do is if the class was misbehaving, he'd just, and then everybody would stop and freeze. Never had to yell.
There you go. Saving his or her breath.
Efficiency.
Time is flying. Any other big things that we want to mention with Jaws before we wrap? It's crazy how fast we could talk about this film for hours. There's so much here, but any other big moments or notable topics that really stood out to you this time around?
What was the prosthetics budget on this? Because I mean, how many different limbs and random things are just like showing up, such as we get when they first find the first woman who's eaten. She just has this hand there with like a bracelet or something on it, and then the crabs are crawling around. There's nothing attached to that hand, but the hand is there to signify there's a body. But like, what's the actual prosthetics budget on this? Because I don't remember there being a huge budget necessarily, but it certainly is influential of somebody this young taking on such a project and somehow making it work. Because I don't know anybody else who was not, for the most part, a first time director that does this kind of movie or takes on this kind of project and makes it somehow work and is acceptable to roll with so many of the different punches of random things that either didn't work right or weren't going to go right. And I know we've introduced a few of them, whether it was the animatronics on the shark really not working or that the foam piece of it just didn't look very good cinematically. The other one that's like a significant portion of this film, particularly to the second half, is the original cinematographer, I think, wanted to moor the camera onto the boat, like screw it down. And somebody at some point, I can't remember who, suggested to Spielberg, the audience will get sick if you have it screwed down to the boat. So they went with the steady or the hand cam essentially for all the boating sequences at the end. And so while you're bobbing on the boat, you feel very much like you're inserted into the whole nature of being on that boat with them. Another just random thing that if you had a more experienced director with a very hard set vision of what this film was going to be, doesn't happen. But somehow all of these things lead up to this film. I don't know if there are too many other random things that where like all the extraneous parts and all these people operating leads to that kind of film. I can only name maybe about a handful of similar experiences where all of the parts individually should not have worked and they were all just taken randomly and somehow lead to this great thing put together, but you're like, it should not work.
Let's put it this way. I've thought about this a lot, which is I started out my career doing different stuff and I decided I wanted to do appellate work in the Court of Appeals. I was just did it. Well, in retrospect, I was pretty stupid because I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a lot of success. And I've read about Mark Cuban getting into computers. He didn't know what he was doing. He just read all of the materials and spent hours on hours studying them. And it's and I think the same thing goes with Spielberg. Some of the greatest innovation and some of the greatest success is generated by people who are too stupid to know that they shouldn't be doing it.
Well, that's why one of the few films I would compare it to, at least on the historical perspective, even though I like Jaws much better than this other film, but it's one we mentioned before, Citizen Kane. Orson Welles did not know what he was doing, but he hired a whole bunch of other people who also didn't know what they were doing, and somehow all of the pieces work. The other one that I would hold up as an example is Singing in the Rain should not work individually in its parts. It's essentially a comedy sketch musical where each part is just like tied to a song that's in the Warner Brothers library of just random songs. But somehow you put it all together, it has somehow a singular narrative for 2 hours, and all of the characters are just so well cast that it rises above its material.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider the year before was American in Paris, and that was just this whole, well done, this whole creative thing, this whole, organized force. And Singing in the Rain was more or less thrown together with clips and pieces from various parts of the studio, and never thought it would be anything more than just a random fill at the theaters.
That's wild. It captures something that I know Sarah and I talk a lot about around like creativity often gets birthed from constraints, and the things that we praise in this film, the tactics used came from constraints, I'm sure. Even the prosthetics budget, to be able to create so many prosthetics, maybe not so much. So you know what? We can only use some of it to make a hand that has to like sit above the sand. And so there's only a little bit for us, for our materials wise, to be able to create, because we need to save it for the legs that are going to fall off somebody else's body later on. But the lack of, or the restraint that we call it, around not having so much of that gore and visual of the violence actually adds to the suspense or the impact of the ending. Like the things we often, I think, praise end up being sometimes very intentional choices, sometimes happy accidents, creativity that's birthed from constraints. It's fascinating to see. And then the way that we then can study this to then make those intentional choices over time, and the legacy then kind of comes back to this film of really seeing like, this really worked. What happened here, and how do we capture that again? All right. Well, thanks for joining us, both of you, for this 50th anniversary discussion of Jaws, and very exciting to hear that y'all are going to come out with an episode coming up soon here. I think you said July 4th. That's kind of genius release timing. That's funny. Was that intentional?
So we have often built in revisit episodes just because they're a little bit shorter into our holidays. So it'll come out the week after 4th of July, but I want to say we're recording it on like July 2nd. So it'll be out on the 9th, I think. It just is a natural thing where I'm like, okay, Jaws, summer, July 4th, it's obviously tied in, so let's make it all work. And 50th anniversary, we're covering 4 of the 5 Best Picture nominees from 75. We're covering this. I think this is the only second time behind Casablanca that we'll be revisiting a film for the second time and third time overall.
Nice. Yeah, so stay tuned on their feed for that coming soon, and we'll see if it gets to number 1 again. That'll be fascinating to see. I think there's so much to be studied here. It's also a beloved film. It's a great one to revisit too. So there's a lot of like rewatchability and restudyability in this film as well. So where can people find more of y'all, your content, all of the film analyses, all that goodness on the interwebs or on their platforms?
Yeah. So like I said in the opening, you can find us on all of the major podcast platforms. It's Greatest Movie of All Time, just as it's sounds. I guess it's spelled. So if you know English phonetics, you should be able to figure that out. Nothing unusual about that name, but anyway, you can also find us on our YouTube page, which is also at Gmode Podcast. We have full video episodes of everything. Or you can catch us on any of our socials at Gmoat Podcast, GMOAT. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, because I refuse to call it X. I think we even have a Facebook page, but we really don't put anything on there. Instagram is on there. I'm trying to think, what else do we have? We have a bunch of different social things. And if you do interact with us, someone, maybe not Dana or I, but someone will definitely respond to all of your individual DMs. So if you have questions for us, either about us personally or suggestions for things to do on the show, we do have an Australian super fan who wanted us to cover one of their individual Australian favorite movies of all time. We have that coming up 2 years from now because I promised to do that one. So we are scheduling well in advance. It is not the most advanced or scheduled in advance movie we have. That's for 2029 when we're covering Revenge of the Nerds with Andrew Corns and Sarah Shea. But yeah, that one's booked out quite far. But otherwise,
the further it gets, the worse it gets as far as classicness. Yeah. It's cringeworthy, but I have to watch it. I watched it at the theater.
But regardless, we have episodes coming out every Wednesday, so you can catch us there. I think we only take 1 week off a year, and that's between Christmas and New Year's. So we have episodes coming up on Toy Story 2 will drop, I think, this coming Wednesday. Then we have Inside Out is coming up. I know we have Nashville by Robert Altman, another 1975 Best Picture nominee at the time. And we just have a whole lot of stuff planned. This year is just huge. And both of you will be joining us later this year for Raging Bull.
Yes.
I have not seen it in years. I'm really looking forward to seeing it again.
There is nobody on planet Earth that is like, let's enjoy a Friday night. Let's fire up Raging Bull.
No. If you are, you've got something's going on up there. There's nothing relaxing about this movie.
Raging Bull is the classic film study in university movie.
I mean, I'm more like, if I want to watch Raging Bull, I tune into the White House press conference.
Oh, this will be fun. This will be real fun. Yeah. Well, we'll include all of that links and info in our show notes. As I mentioned earlier, their episodes are incredibly rich. So there's a lot there. There's a lot. I always leave feeling like I learned so much from these two. So definitely check out their show. Great docket coming up. Stay tuned for 2029. Stick around for that. Teasing it already. I love it. All right. Well, our name, movies, and us.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Thank you very much for having us on. We very much enjoyed the invite, and
yes,
we look forward to having you guys on here coming up.
Yeah, we're great at picking stressful movies, y'all. We're going from Jaws together to Raging Bull. Like, what will we do next? We're only on the up and up.
Trying to think what would be a good follow-up.
Yeah, what would top
triple feature?
Raging Bull?
My mind immediately went to Taxi Driver, but we've done that twice already.
We still have Godzilla available.
That's true. I have a soft spot for the original King Kong. I actually think it really holds up.
I did kind of promise it to my high school friend who's a chemistry professor who's a big Godzilla fan. So
thank you for letting me know before this moment.
Key details, y'all.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. We can't wait to pod soon for Raging Bull, and I'm sure we'll do more together. It'll be great. Well, our name, Movies and Us, sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here. We're so glad you spent some time with us and our two guests today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about Jaws, its legacy, its 50-year just impact. So much to discuss there. We're curious to hear what your thoughts are and your relationship to this film. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at moviesnestpod, or email us at moviesnestpod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on Movies Us and our other podcasts, TV and Us. Also, fun fact announcement, this is our 401st episode, and it is our first video episode. So we have recently made the switch. We've aligned it to our 400 milestone. So y'all are here for us on our milestone first video episode. So that's kind of fun. Fun fact.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Faces. So yeah, we're on YouTube at Movies and Us Pod. Check out us there. We've got all of our episodes now with a whole nother dimension, 3D. It's crazy. Instead of just our voices. We'll be back next week to discuss more about Jaws. We'll be joined by other film friends that are going to be sharing their most heart-stopping scene and why. You'll hear from these two folks on what their picks are and a few others. So we've put together a collection of kind of choices, thoughts, opinions about which scene and why. In the meantime, we hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.